Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and as I alluded to during my special guest Q&A with Reserved Investments, thank you again, Sean, for joining me for an hour to talk about collectibles as a whole. I had to go through this. This was a pretty insane signature auction from Heritage. All of these items ended on May 31st, and I don't know what to make of this other than there appears to be a lot of fast and loose money and a lot of inexperienced Star Wars collectors that were part of this auction, because most of these, not all of them, but most of these prices don't make much sense relative to past data points that we've seen. And it was pretty incredible, some of the final sales prices. And I did include some posters and some other kind of interesting non-action figure items that were part of this auction. I'm not going to go through everything, but I wanted to kind of hit some highlights because, it was just jaw-dropping. I think I've seen some pretty crazy prices in the past, but nothing like this. Nothing like this, especially for the action figures. They were some big-time overpays. And as we talked about with Sean, I think you're going to have a lot of trouble getting your money out of some of these items. I don't know what to say other than I'm just going to show you some of the items. All right, we're going to start off with some of the non-action figure items. I don't know what the values are for these things. That's not something I track. I don't track like props or, any kind of movie memorabilia type stuff. But I wanted to show you some of the final sales prices. This was the fourth draft, an original fourth draft script for Star Wars. You can see it's got the old school logo that was used on, similar logo was used on some of the banners that were taken to different Comic-Cons before the release of Star Wars A New Hope in order to generate interest and to hopefully have good box office. The rest is history. But this was an original draft, fourth draft, and it sold for $8,125. These prices that I'm going to quote include the buyer's premium, but also keep in mind that you have to pay taxes, sales tax, on anything that you buy on Heritage. And for me, it's an extra almost 10% on top of what the winning bid would be. And as we get to some of the action figure prices, it's just going to blow your mind what the prices look like. All right, here was another kind of memorabilia type of item. This was a miniature panel of the Death Star surface that was used in the original Star Wars Episode 4. That one sold for $4,000. And, it kind of shows you where in the movie this piece was actually seen. So it's a fairly prominent piece from, from the screenshot that was shown in the movie. So very cool to see that piece sell. And again, I don't know what the values are for these types of items, but I wanted to at least show them. A few posters, there were a lot more posters that sold, but I wanted to show you a couple. And this one actually did not sell. This was a Israeli market poster for the original New Hope. And let's see here. It's been over 10 years since Heritage auctioned off an example of this scarce Israeli one-sheet for Star Wars. The poster incorporates art from both Tom Jung as well as the Hildebrandt brothers into a seamless design, unique among all international posters for the film. The majority of the Israeli posters in circulation originated from producer Gary Kurtz's personal archive. The poster was folded across the center for distribution and exhibits only light surface wear and handling. You can see the fold mark there. So the reserve on this one was $10,000, and it did not sell. It did not sell. But here's another one that did sell. This was a Hong Kong poster. And this was actually printed on linen. So that's kind of cool. And this one did sell, including the buyer's premium, for $7,812.50. I like that one a lot. I thought that's pretty cool to show you that one. Next up, there were some kind of replica costumes that were designed and made after the fact. And it included a letter on the letterhead from Andrew Answorth, who was one of the costume designers for the original Stormtroopers. And so this one is it includes like a COA from Andrew Answorth, who again designed the Stormtrooper outfits. And so this was a replica Tusken Raider outfit, and it would make a really cool Halloween costume if it wasn't so expensive, but it did sell for $5,000, including the buyer's premium. Same seller, or the same designer had this X-Wing outfit, but that one did not sell. That one was listed for $5,000. It did not sell, so it's available kind of in a buy it now situation on Heritage for $5,000. Seems like a lot of money for a replica costume, but that gives you an idea of what it looks like versus the scene from the movie. And it's got a couple of other screenshots there. And it does look pretty accurate. I mean, I'll give them that. It looks super accurate. Very, very cool to see that. Here was a CGC graded copy, VHS copy of the original Star Wars. It was graded CGC 9.2, sealed with an A rating on the seal. And I'll try to zoom in on a few items here and there, but you can see, CGC just started grading vintage or any kind of sealed VHS tapes. And so it's got the seal type and then the grade for the seal, things like that. So 9.2, very high grade. But I was shocked by this sales price, $23,750. To me, the VHS market is such a weird thing, given that nobody really, my kids are never going to know what a VHS tape is. This is the kind of item that I was talking about with Sean, where to me, this is a very risky proposition, spending almost $24,000, over $24,000 once you account for taxes. For me, it would have been closer to $26,000 with taxes on something like this. And I find it hard to believe that this is an item that's going to hold its value. To me, this is ripe for going down in value eventually. I can't make heads or tails of why anyone would pay $25,000, $26,000 after taxes and buyer's premium for a sealed VHS, admittedly in high grade, but that's a risky kind of proposition. Here was a very cool retail display header for the first 12, and this one sold for $12,875. This is after the buyer's premium. This is actually not a terrible deal, if you ask me. I thought this was actually a pretty good deal. This is the kind of item that I would send immediately to AFA and then turn right around and send it back to Heritage, and it would probably sell for something stupid, judging by some of the other prices that were shown here. So I thought that was actually a very fair deal for what it was. Now we're going to dig into some pretty incredible sales, and I had to talk about this one first. This is a L-slot rocket-firing Boba Fett prototype, hand-painted. It was hand-painted in Kenner colors, and I want to read the description first, but this is one of only 2 examples known to exist that have the hand-painted, L-slot. And so, I don't know how to describe this other than, I feel like this was a drastic overpay. It sold for $525,000, including the buyer's premium before taxes. For me, that would have been closer to $580,000 to buy this. Now, we've talked about some unpainted L slots and J slots that have sold over the years, usually in the ballpark of, let's call it $80,000 to $150,000, anywhere in that ballpark. And, yes, it is one of only 2 hand-painted examples that use the Kenner colors, and there you can see it's got kind of the Kenner color motif, hand-painted with a lot of damage. So it was an AFA 60 hand-painted L-slot prototype, molded in blue and painted in gray to illustrate the plastic color to be used on the final J slot. And then, of course, the J slot was also removed, and it was just a glued-in rocket for the retail release. The rest is history. This was graded in February of 2021, signed off and authenticated by Tom Derby, obviously the main principal at AFA. So, again, this has garnered the most attention in the Facebook groups because of this price. And the usual comment has been that Heritage does a really good job of marketing these types of items to maybe first-time or non-collectors that have maybe a better sense of values. Could I have seen this going for over $100,000 or possibly $200,000? Yes, I could have seen that, given that it was one of only 2 with that paint scheme hand-painted. But we've seen a number of other L slots and J slots, unpainted, things like that, again, don't have the hand-painted aspect to it. But is it really worth an extra, let's call that In this market, I would say at least an extra $400,000 versus getting an unpainted AFA 60 or AFA higher grade unpainted example L slot that I don't think it would touch anywhere near to, in this current environment. I don't think it would touch 150 personally, but I don't know these very well. Okay. I want to make sure to disclose that. I do not follow rocket firing L slot or J slot prototype Boba Fett's very often. I just cover them when I see one get listed on Hakes, since Hakes is our usual kind of manner, the usual auction house for a lot of this stuff. But hats off to Heritage. I mean, yes, this is a comment that I saw on Facebook, is that you get, if anything that you watch, you get daily email reminders for this stuff. And there are big time whales out there that have a lot of money to spend despite the iffy economic environment, high inflation environment. There's people that are recession proof. And as I talked about with Sean with reserved investments, they have FU money. And this is FU money. If you're going to spend $575,000. Now, I didn't pull it up, but I'm going to do it right now. All right, so let's pull this up. All right, so I'm going to go to my CD calculator, if I can find it. Bear with me. All right, so here's a CD calculator. I just put in some money into a CD, a 3-month CD, and for a 3-month time frame, 3 months, I'm getting 5.4%. At the end of, annualized APY of 5.4%. So you, just in 3 months, you could have taken that, let's call it after taxes, $575,000, and you'd be making $7,610. And that's with zero risk. Every 3 months, you could be earning that. So, if you annualize that on a year basis, you are making $31,000 interest on your $575,000 that you spent on that L slot rocket firing Boba Fett. Think about that. In 1 year, with taking zero market risk. This is FDIC insured investment, assuming roughly, let's call it 5, the rates, it's got an inverted yield curve right now. Okay. So let's say it's 5.3, whatever the number is, but you're talking roughly about $30,000 that you're giving up in that's just in 1 year on that $575,000 that this guy spent on the L slot rocket firing Boba Fett. So that's FU money that you don't care about that. To tie up $575,000 after buyer's premium and after taxes on this, that's an incredible sale, and just a testament to that upper end echelon buyer that's still out there right now, even despite the slowdown across most collectible spaces, comic books, action figures, whatever you collect, even the art world, as Sean hinted at. So, wow, that's amazing. Some other kind of crazy prices, and this is, again, going back to my comment about the vast majority of the buyers in this auction lot were uneducated, okay? Because this was labeled a 12-back A, blonde-haired Luke Farm Boy, AFA 90. Now, you can see it's a single score. And for those of us that are experienced collectors, we know that this is an old AFA grade because it doesn't have any subgrades for the card, blister, and figure. And it was labeled an AFA 90. All you had to do was look at this one photo and realize this is not an AFA 90, all right? I mean, look at the close-ups here of this Luke Farm Boy. You can see very clearly that this figure has discolored inside the blister. It's got very noticeable pinkish hue to the arms and to the bottom portion of the tunic versus the torso piece, which is, you could say, okay, fine, that's AFA 90 quality. But clearly, this is not an AFA 90. This is not even an AFA 85 anymore, folks. This is at best, I'd say an AFA 80 versus what the person paid for it. I'm not saying it's not a nice item. It's a great item. But if you crack this thing out and send it back to AFA, or even if you send it as is back to AFA for 3-tier grading, no way that this gets an AFA 90. Zero chance. And I think it's zero chance it gets an AFA 85. I think it gets an AFA 80. So somebody spent $30,000 on a 12-back A Luke Farm Boy. This is not even a double telescoping Luke Farm Boy. This is just a 12-back A regular Saber Luke Farm Boy. So somebody spent $30,000 on an item that is worth, I would say, at best, maybe 10. They overpaid by 3x. That's my personal opinion on it. I think an AFA 80 12-back A non-telescoping Saber Luke Farm Boy doesn't even hit $10,000 personally, if you put it up on Hakes, so or even back on Heritage. So I think that this was a drastic overpay and just a classic example of an uneducated buyer spending FU money on an item and not realizing what they're buying. Somebody just did not know what they're doing. Next up was a old label AFA 85 12-back A Ben Kenobi. Now this one's probably still an AFA 85. You could send it back because Ben Kenobis, they don't really suffer at least as far as I know, from cape staining, things like that. But more on that in a little while when we get to the vinyl cape Jawa. So this is truly a 12-back A AFA 85, and that one sold for $5,000. That's fine. That's a fair number right there, okay? So somebody was smart on that one versus the Luke. Next up was an AFA 85. Now this one has the updated, 3-tier grading, SKU on figure stand, 12-back A Princess Leia. This is a nice item, and this one looks like an AFA 85, just looking at it casually here. You could maybe say, okay, there's some yellowing going on. I think that yellowing is probably from the blaster's sticker that's holding the tape that's holding the figure in place. So that yellowing that you see, maybe that's really probably from the sticker or the tape just highlighted there. But you could say, okay, maybe this is an AFA 80 quality figure, but it's already been graded as such, right? The figure scores an 80. So I would feel comfortable bidding on this if I had this kind of money. $10,625 for a 12-back A Princess Leia SKU on the figure stand. That's the earliest possible 12-back. Now, it was a punched example, no price sticker, versus an unpunched. So $10,625 seems like a lot of money to me, but even that one is a fairly reasonable number relative to what this Farm Boy sold for. Here was a small head Han Solo 12-back A AFA 85 old label again. I think this one holds up. This was an AFA 85, $10,625 on that one. So somebody just bid away, and I would wager, quite honestly, that all of these were picked up by the same buyer, or the vast majority of them were picked up by the same buyer. They just wanted an instant 12-back collection, and they didn't particularly care about the prices. Chewbacca, the bowcaster has fallen out of his hand from what I can tell there. Let's take a closer look at it. So the bowcaster has come out of his hand, and, again, I don't particularly care about that, but you can argue that that's, maybe not an AFA 85 anymore. This was a single label. Obviously an old grading label between the certification number and the single label. That one sold for $6,250 though. So again, relative to what some of these others have sold for, that was fairly reasonable. Next up was an AFA 85 12-back B R2-D2, 3-tier score, $15,000. $15,000. Now, again, I don't follow 12-backs that closely, so potentially a 12-back BR2 is tough to find. But $15,000 seems like insanity to me. That's crazy, given that you could probably get a 12-back C R2-D2 AFA 85 for what, maybe $2,000 max, $2,500 at the very top end. So $15,000 seems really high to me. Here was an alternate head sculpt, which is kind of cool. C-3PO 12-back C. I'm guessing that this was probably used for the Japanese market, and it just missed the Takara sticker on the front, because that's what I'm used to the alternate head sculpt being for the Takara market. It's very clearly, as you can see there, the alternate head sculpt. But again, were some of these 12-backs with the alternate head sculpt C-3POs made and released in the U.S. market? I mean, who knows? And for back in 1977, very possible. But this is the one I associate with the Takara market, or the Takara factory. So I'm assuming that's what that is. But it's on a 12-back C, which is that fits with the timeline for the Japanese market alternate head variant. AFA 90, does it hold up? Probably. But $25,000, given that you can probably pick up an AFA 80 12-back C alternate head sculpt with the Takara import sticker for, even an 85. I mean, sub $2,000 easily, I would think. Maybe $2,500. This one sold for 10 times that number, or more, 15 times that number. So again, insanity. That's a crazy number. This is probably the biggest, example in terms of showing that the buyers for this particular heritage auction were maybe not as educated, right? So this was an old label AFA 85 12 back A vinyl cape Jawa single score, and the Jawa has noticeable cape staining. So look at that Jawa. You can see it's got cape staining on it. So this is not an AFA 85, right? This is like, a 75 plus, at best, a 75 plus. And someone spent $30,000 on it. So somebody just lost a lot of money on that, because that is not an AFA 85 anymore. All else being equal, because of that cape staining. And that cape staining, if anything, is going to get worse. And if you send it back in as is, still in the case to AFA, and say, I just want to get recased with 3-tier grading, it's going to come back a 75 plus at best. So, I feel for a lot of these buyers. I mean, I don't, because buyer beware, right? You need to be educated before you start spending this kind of big boy money. And clearly, this auction attracted some buyers that know nothing about graded action figures. Here was a 20 back A AFA 85 Jawa, just so a standard cloth cape Jawa. Single score grading, again, straight 85. That one sold for $27.50. Maybe a little high, but that's a little bit closer to market. Here was probably the most egregious, other than potentially the rocket firing Boba Fett L slot prototype. This is the most egregious. This was labeled a single score AFA 95 21 back B Boba Fett. Clearly, it's not a 95 anymore, just by looking at the weapon, right? The weapon has fallen out of his hand and is now lodged behind Boba Fett's back, between the rocket pack and the card back. So it's not going to get if you took this, again, it's just falling out of the tape. The weapon's falling out of the tape. The highest score you can get for the figure score is an 80. So there's no way that you're going to get a 95 score on this, again, if you grade. And someone spent $84,375 on it. So this is probably an 80 plus right now, maybe an 85 if the graders were being generous. They could say an 85 for the blister, 85 for the card, 80 for the figure score, for an overall 85. Okay, so this is at best an 85, probably worth fair market value $18,000 to $20,000 top end. So somebody paid $84,000 for an item that's worth about, on the top end, in my opinion, in the current market environment, probably $20,000. So they overpaid by over 4 times for this. So now, if I'm holding these types of items, AFA 90 mint on cards, early card backs, 12 backs, 21 backs, 20 backs, whatever you got. If I'm holding these old case AFA 80s, or excuse me, AFA 85s and 90s and 95s, things like that, if I'm holding on those and I've been thinking about selling them, this is a good example of why you'd probably want to use Heritage for it. And they probably charge 30 to 50% in terms of their commissions, and after tax reporting or whatever, you're probably in the ballpark going to lose off of this final sales price 20%, 30 to 40% off of this price. But still, if I am the owner of this item and I get $84,000 minus 40% of that, you're still getting way more than it's worth. So I would be very hesitant to send my high grade types of items like this to anybody else but Heritage, because clearly Heritage has done a great job marketing them to collectors that don't know what they're doing. Here's some other egregious examples. This one wasn't too bad, but it was labeled an AFA 80 Revenge of the Jedi proof card for Leia, but I don't know what happened to some of these examples there, because if you look at the close-ups of it, I mean, this is probably on the case, I assume, but down in the corner there, it's got a really bad crease. And, I don't know if that's from jiggling around inside the case or what, but this case obviously has a lot of damage. I question whether this holds up to an 80 score if you got it recased. That, that sold at $26.25, probably about right. It's one of the main heroes. Leia, Vader, Luke's, Han's, they tend to command about this price, but I question whether that's really an 80 score. This is, another one that I was like, really? This was labeled an AFA 85 Luke Bespin proof card, but just dig into some of the photos on here, and you can see some bad scuffing that to me looks like it's on the actual card. Now, some of this stuff, no, this is probably on the actual case, but I would be very hesitant to spend this kind of money looking at the condition of either this case or the proof card. I don't know. You're taking a risk that it's just got scuffing on the proof card on the case versus on the actual proof card itself. I mean, but this was very heavily damaged, whether it was the AFA case or the proof card. Who knows? It sold for $47.50, which again, assuming it's on the case and not the proof card, then that's probably about right. But I mean, to me, if I'm dropping $5,000 plus on a proof card, I'm gonna make sure that my case is pristine or has very minimal scratches to it. Here was another egregious example. This was an AFA 85 Imperial shuttle, and Chris on Rogue 5 Toys had one of these, and he sold it for half this price or less. So this one sold for $87.50 plus. You got to pay another, whatever your tax rate is, but for me, it's another, let's call it $900. So you're talking almost $10,000 for an item that you can pick up either on eBay or on Facebook for half that price or less, and usually or less. I mean, that's insanity to pay $87.50 plus taxes on it. Here's the famous C-3PO boner card, the Arrow card. This was a Gem Mint 10. This is one of 5 on the population report. So these do not come up often for sale. That one sold for $25,000. Very interesting sale there. So, again, there were some other items. There were some mint and seal box items and some other early card backs that sold. But I just wanted to give you a taste of some of the incredible sales here. And to me, obviously this has garnered the most attention because whenever this goes to get resold in 10 or 20 or 30 years from now, I bet it sells for a fraction of $525,000. But, obviously Heritage did a great job marketing their items, but I just question whether the buyers for some of these items, you need to do your homework if you're going to spend this kind of money, and clearly a lot of these buyers did not do it. So that's all I really had for this video. Leave me a comment below with what your thoughts are on some of these eye-popping sales prices. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.